Today we will have a 30-minute session with Nathan, our one and only Nathan that made the Umbraco Workflow before. Yes, for you, Nathan.
Thank you. Thank you all. Before I start, if anyone can tell me where... Okay, don't worry about it because we skipped that title slide, so it doesn't matter. I was going to see if anyone knew where the name for this session came from, but if anyone did know, there's a beer for you later. Oh, what the future holds. If you knew it, you'd know it. So anyway, intros are a bit weird, but my name's Nathan. I'm part of the DXP group at Umbraco HQ. We look after commercial products, integrations, the marketplace, umbraco.com, among a few other things. My primary focus is Umbraco Workflow, but obviously the last few months I've learned a lot more about forms and deploy as we got those across the line for V14. Back in the day, I built Plumber, which was the original version of what is now Umbraco Workflow, which HQ acquired about 2 years ago. It was around this time, Codegarden in 2022, that we were getting ducks in a row and getting things across the line. And for better or worse, depending on who you ask, I came with Plumber and joined HQ at the same time. So, that's all wonderful, but what is workflow? I mean, and it's probably more than what you think it is. This isn't going to be a technical session, it's not a V14 session, but instead I want to highlight some of the parts of workflow that aren't as well known. They're not the core content approval workflows. Also want to have a look ahead at some of the things we've got planned for the future. Some of those are ideas that have come from talking to people like yourselves, other developers, partners, clients, end users. Some of them have come from sort of internal HQ discussions, and some of them are just from strange corners of my brain. So workflow is a tool for keeping your content safe. When sites get bigger and you get more and more editors, more and more content, you need some sort of mechanism to control who can publish what, when they publish it, and what goes live on your site. So for all their good intentions, sometimes I think the people who are tasked with updating content aren't perhaps the best people to be doing that. It's not really part of their job perhaps, or it's just one more thing that they have to fit into an already busy day. So that's where workflow sort of fits. I don't know what happened to my arrows, but they're now sort of train tracks. So it has the same effect. We can see that workflow controls who sees content before it ends up going live. And that can be linear, like we just saw, but it can also get more and more complex. We can add approval thresholds where you get to one stage, you have multiple people who might have to approve those changes. Content can get rejected and sent back to the start of a workflow, and it can bounce around and come back through again, and we can have conditional stages where workflow may not even be needed. And then we can combine all of that with variants and end up with essentially an infinite number of arrows on a screen that are now train tracks. But workflow is part of Umbraco's suite of commercial products. So there is a free version, there is a licensed version. The free version has limits on the number of approval groups, so we can have up to 5, and it restricts some of the more advanced features, which typically aren't the things you're going to need on a smaller site. If you're running a small site where the free version's enough, the features that you don't have access to, you probably didn't need anyway. So larger sites, the ones that need those features, you need to go and talk to Suits, and they'll happily hook you up with a license. So workflow is a lot more than those core approval workflows, and that's the things I want to have a look at today. So just like I said, when a site gets more complex and needs some of those more additional features, the rest of the workflow suite really sort of comes into its own then. So in recent versions, I think Philip stole my thunder on a couple of these yesterday in the keynote, we've added an advanced search dashboard, date-based content reviews, and earlier this year released it's an extension package for quickly scaffolding up a test environment and standing up workflow so you can actually see what it does. But before we get to that, we need to take a moment to acknowledge the departure of a dear old friend. In November 2013, Umbraco 7 arrived, brand new back office, built on AngularJs. We all know the story, and we all know that as of last month, Angular's gone. So in honour, I guess, of that decade of service, it's only fair that we take a moment to bid farewell to Angular with a quick game of things that are older than AngularJS. So now, Angular, just so we know where we're thinking, Angular was released on the 20th of October 2010, which is a very, very long time ago in the world of JavaScript frameworks, because today being Thursday, I think we're due for 2 new frameworks to be released. So it's pretty ancient, but how does it compare to Instagram? Anyone? Is AngularJS older than Instagram? Instagram is slightly older. It was released a fortnight before. I spent a lot of time finding these. And then it sold for $1 billion in cash to Facebook 2 years later. So yeah, there's a goal. The Green Lantern, that fantastic piece of cinema, is not as old as AngularJS, but AngularJS has aged better and has more positive reviews. This is not the whole content. This only goes for a little bit. Another sellout, Minecraft, what did it go for? $2.5 billion in 2014. It was released in 2011. Not older than AngularJS. Last one, because it's getting old. This dirty old cheeseburger. That is apparently a 25-year-old cheeseburger, and it's incredibly hard to tell apart from one that was made 5 minutes ago. So anyway, as much fun as it is to have a stab at Angular, we're all going to be working with it until December 2026. Umbraco 13 is around until, and continuing after that. We'll be supporting sites and things on that. So it's kind of going away, but it's still kind of not. So anyway, back to what we're actually here for. Content reviews. These were added actually in Workflow 10. So the first version of Workflow had content reviews. So they've been around a while, but I'm not sure that it's perhaps as well known as those core approval workflows. So the idea here, in a nutshell, is content reviews allow you to set a review date on your documents, at which point we generate reminders via email and back office notifications and things, prompting editors to come back and just to update that content, or even just to review it and make sure it's still current. Nothing else happens. We don't unpublish things. We don't lock content or anything. We just prompt them to come back. So we'll have a look at what that actually looks like. Do I need to click again to play that video? I think I might. No, I don't. We should have a video there. I mean, we do, it's just not playing. It's not a very exciting video.
Got a lot of Danish PowerPoint error.
Hold music. I told Niels we needed the band. This would be about the time that the band would be. Anyway, look, we can go on. We won't worry about the video. But there is another one, so if we can have it sorted before we get to the next one. But the idea with content reviews is now we have a dashboard in the back office where we can get that overview of all the content that's expired, needing review. We can set those dates globally. We can set dates on content items. We can set dates on document types. Reuses some of the inheritance and permission models that exist for workflow. So you can have that bit of reassurance that at the right time, the right people are prompted to come back, check out the content, make sure it's up to date. If they need to make changes, they can make changes, send it for approval, and so on. So it's a complementary feature to those main approval workflows. There was a video. We don't have a video anyway. Can we get rid of that dialogue? Because then my clicker works again. Yes, don't let your videos get lost. Advanced search, that's been around for a while now too. It's a tool for making complex back office searches simple. So sometimes the back office search that comes out of the box can be a little bit simple, a little bit narrow. Then at the other end of the spectrum, we have the examine search, which is way more complex than we can expect users to ever. You can't expect users to come in and write examine queries because they need to find a news item from 2 years ago. So we don't also want them in the settings section at all. So advanced search fits in the middle. It's an interface for building complex searches across content types, variants, properties, and data types, and property editors, everything. I didn't do a video for this. That's good. This might even be the same screenshots. Anyway, so the idea for advanced search is that your users can select a subset of all the content types, a subset of variants. They can then search across all those properties, a subset of properties, a single property, data types, property editors. They can get really, really, really granular without having to know what's going on underneath. So I'm probably going to get this around the wrong way. I keep getting it around the wrong way. Property editors, data types, you can subset. So you can use a search against all the data types that use a common property editor, but then you can subset that down even further so that you can get really, really specific. And so, I mean, why is that useful? It allows more context in a search in the back office. So you can say, for example, the CEO of your company leaves, you need to update the website because you, in theory, need to remove all references to that person. But there's a bit more nuance than that. It's contextual because you might not be, or you shouldn't be removing them from annual reports or from old news items. So you can't just go into a global find and replace and say, switch this name for this name because it's not right. You're not ending up with accurate content. So advanced search then makes it possible to surface up the subset of documents that it is appropriate to update. You still have to manually go and do those updates, but at least that way, users can be confident that they've updated all the references that they need to update and they haven't missed any. Right. So one of the issues that I think we've always had with Workflow is that you don't get much out of the box. I mean, obviously you get the product, but it's not plug and play. You can't just sort of start and use it. After you install it, you get it's an empty dashboard. You get an empty, essentially, Workflow section, and there's not really anything there. So it's not like CMS or commerce where a starter kit makes sense. We can make some assumptions around what you want and scaffold things out for you. Workflows, it's really contextual. So that can be daunting and a bit confusing. You get that. So to that end, we released the creatively named Workflow data generator package. So it's a simple extension that runs alongside Workflow, and it lets you scaffold out content, users, user groups, approval groups, I should say, and a simple workflow configuration. So it's enough, you can install that, and it's enough to stand Workflow up, explore around, see how it works without having to actually really understand the product too deeply. It's open source. That very short URL takes you through to the GitHub repo. So you can have a poke around, see how it works, and even sort of explore how the Workflow C# APIs work and find some extension points and things for yourselves. Now this is not allowed to show it. It's probably because it's Australian. Anyway, this just means that my demo at the end has to go for longer, so we'll see how that goes. So what's new in Workflow 14, which I'm hoping is the bit that everyone's been eagerly awaiting and hanging out for. New in Workflow 14 is that, and that, and that, and that. That's a bug. And there are some of those, we know they're there, and we'll be working on crushing those for a final release later this month. So Workflow 14 is a technology update. There's no new features. It's a technology update. And that's intentional. We want to try and keep those major updates easy. Because if you're, especially from 13 to 14, you're dealing with a CMS upgrade. If you can just update dependencies and not have to do anything else, I feel like it's the right thing to do. Obviously, the whole back office is rebuilt, but there's no new features as such. I'll let those guys crawl for a minute. There was a big long pause in that second video that I wanted to drink water, but anyway. So that one, yes. So in saying that there's nothing new in that back office and there's no new features or anything, we're not going to look at any of that rebuild, but we have open sourced, or at least published, and building in public, the Workflow client. So there's lots of things in there, lots of decisions that we've made around how things could work, because Workflow was a fairly early adopter. I think I started work on it in August last year, which in hindsight might have been a little bit early, but we're getting there. And so I think a part of the problem is when you're looking through the CMS back office code base, there is so much in there. There is so much code and so many concepts that don't perhaps relate directly to package development. So it's easy to get lost. So hopefully the workflow client preview package or repo is enough to sort of smooth that learning curve and present some examples that are a bit more focused to what package devs will be doing. And the ghost of workflow yet to come. So since Workflow 14 has, like I said, no new features, we'll look ahead into the future a little bit instead. And there are a few ideas that have sort of been floating around for a while that we'd like to progress this year, hopefully. Some are more concrete than others, and some, like workflows for media, for now will not be happening. I get asked about this reasonably often, whether workflow can work on media. But with the way media works, it's not possible at the moment. Because media has no state, it's media in the back office just is. Whereas content, we can sit workflow, like the slide, workflow can live in between those draft and published states. We can go around and around until the content's okay, and then workflow can publish it. So we can't do that with media without some substantial changes to media. So for now, sorry, no workflow. And AI. I am contractually obligated to mention AI in this presentation. That is why Philip is here. But it would be cool. This is one that's sort of ephemeral and just being thought about. But workflow stages at the moment are all human approval stages. They're all users doing something. So the idea with AI in workflow, the way I could see it working would be we could add stages to a workflow that are an action that just happens. It might be content compliance checks, it might be content analysis, it might be, I'm not going to say mid-journey image generation because we don't do that anymore. That was last year's slides. But that idea of having something happen automatically, and it may not even be AI, and this is a little self-promo. I have another package called Preflight, which is a framework for building pre-publishing content checks. So it does things like readability checks and broken link checks and link safety checks, and that's extensible, so you can write your own plugins for it. So you could see how that kind of idea could fit in workflow. You make pluggable workflow stages so that for your particular site, you can do whatever it is that makes sense for your content. You can have those approval steps and then some final things that happen before publishing. I don't know, maybe that's where AI fits. Maybe Jeffrey and the Perflex crew make Umbraco 15 completely sentient, and I don't know, we're all out of the job and have nothing to do. Conditional workflows. So I touched on this earlier around being able to skip stages in a workflow based on the state of the content. But this could go further, and again, train tracks, sorry, and have completely conditional workflows where the entire workflow can be included or excluded based on what's happened in the content. So if someone updates, it might say a metadata field. That may not need workflow approval. That change can just go straight through to production. But other changes, that entire workflow may need to run. So that's not super exciting. But if you combine that with approval group permissions, it can get more complicated. So you can have different groups that are responsible for different changes, and they get pulled into workflows based on what's changed. You could take that even further and complicate it further with elements and say that if a certain element type is edited, the workflow needs to run, or particular stages in that workflow need to run. There are challenges there, the technical implementation of that would get complicated, but I think the bigger issue is how do you build a UI for that when you've got potentially infinitely complex configuration? It's what do you give, especially when you're building a tool that is meant to make life easier for people. What happens if you then go and make it more complicated to use? So there's a balance there, but I can see that it's sort of a nice progression from those conditional stages to be able to make entire workflows conditional based on what's happening in the content. Release sets. This is draft content, but better. I don't work in marketing. I don't have good taglines. And if anyone can think of a better name for this when we're finished, I'm all for it. So the idea here is that you can create alternative versions of documents. So not alternative versions in the sense of 1s, 2s, 3s in the tree, but actually alternate versions of a document that are attached to their, well, it's not even a parent document, but attached to another document. And then you'll be able to flip between those versions and take one into live, take your old draft, sit it off to the side so that you can be working on building out different concepts and different page versions in parallel. That's part of the release sets idea. That's the versioning part. Then the idea to build on top of that is that the release sets let you take a collection of these versions and schedule individual versions within that set, schedule the entire set, or schedule versions within a scheduled set. So there's scheduling all the way down. That does need changes in the way the CMS handles content versions, which initially I thought was the way to go. But it feels much more like it should be a separate workflow-contained feature. We don't want to make, well, I don't want to be asking for changes in the CMS for such a particular use case. Yeah, no, that's all wonderful, but what's the point? Why is this even going to be useful? We're going to meet Jane. So Jane's working away. She's in a marketing department, so building campaigns, lots of content edits, lots of versioning of content, moving things around in the tree because she needs this page to be live at this time, but she doesn't want to block that day-to-day work. You can't be editing the homepage to publish it in 2 weeks because then when someone finds a typo that they have to fix immediately, what do you do with your work-in-progress version? She tracks all these changes outside the CMS, and as ridiculous as that sounds, people do it. We're running a campaign so we can have a spreadsheet of all the things we need to do. And it's going to sit over here in Excel, and we're going to sit over here in the CMS. So she's frustrated, and she's feels like she's wasting time, and it's inefficient, and she's right. And release sets will solve everything. They'll fix it all. She'll be able to develop a set of documents without blocking those daily sort of business changes on the live site. She can schedule things. She can track it all within the CMS. She doesn't need any more spreadsheets. She's going to be happier. She'll be healthier. She'll get a puppy. Her boyfriend will propose. She'll get a holiday house in Spain or wherever people in Europe go for holidays. Release sets will fix it all. And I'm glad I didn't do this as a video because then I'd have to stand here awkwardly for the next 8 minutes. Instead, we'll do a real demo. If we can flip the button, there we go. Don't copy my password. So, helps if I tap the right part of the trackpad. So this is Umbraco 12. So I'm allowed to talk about content apps and things because they technically still exist. But like I said before, this is sort of this is a little side part. When you're saying that workflow out of the box doesn't give you much, this is what you get. It's without that anything in there, it's sort of a bit, yeah, who cares? So, release sets. We'll start with the alternate versions idea. So this is just a very, very, very simple page. We're going, simple page. We have one. Again, we'll use our imaginations. We'll pretend this is a really complex block grid, the sort of page where you might be iterating on it and iterating on it and iterating on it before you want it to go live. So we have versions. There's nothing in here. But what we can do is we can create a version which initially is just a copy of the current draft of the page. We'll get more specific and we'll call it Codegarden 2024. We can save that. We can update our block grid, which is we're using our imaginations. That's what we just did. Now we have a version. We still have our draft. We could say hello 24 just to make sure that this still works. We can save and obviously we'd send that through a workflow. We wouldn't just publish it. Our live page updates. This is all amazing stuff, I know. But then when we come back here, we can decide we're even going to be more efficient because Steffi's chasing us and saying, get organised. 24 is nearly finished. We need 25. So now we have 2 alternate versions. We still have our original draft. We can still change it, publish it as we need. But what we can do is at the end of tomorrow, we can just make that one current. We now have 2025. We can save and publish it. All things going to plan. The live page is now 25. And the previous version, which was our previous live page, is this guy. Yeah, because I changed it. I shouldn't have changed it. That confused me. But we can see, so we can have these multiple different versions of the same page that exist in parallel without impacting that draft to publish flow on the main piece of content. So that's the alternate versions part of the release sets, which on its own, I think could be quite useful. But then when we combine it with release sets, by going back to the dashboard, to this dashboard, we have a Codegarden 24 release set. So there's some bits and pieces in here that I've just been playing with that we won't look at because they either don't work or aren't relevant. But the idea then is that we can add content to this release set. We'll take this page because we just published it for 25, but then we can choose which version we want to include in that release set. I probably shouldn't publish 25 because now it doesn't make as much sense. But anyway, we can add a version. We can choose to schedule that version. We can mark it as ready to release. So these are all sort of just ideas that I'm trying to put together to build out a concept. It was started as a proof of concept to see what we'd need to change in the database, but then I started building interface stuff and it sort of went a lot further than it ever should have. But so from there you can see if we had multiple pages with multiple different versions, we could, in theory, if we were really, really organized, we could build out an entire campaign for Codegarden 25 and schedule it and schedule all the content within it. We could then, using the same pages in the CMS, so we're not building new sections, we could create versions for 2026 and build a release set for 2026 and schedule that set and all the pages within it. And then in the interim, we can still edit and republish the main live pages. So we're not having to flip between drafts and roll back and create versions and move things around in the tree. Alongside that, so we were talking before about the idea of having to track, say, a large campaign, you're tracking things in the CMS and outside the CMS. That's sort of the idea that I'm trying to work out here with these tasks, where it's in the CMS, but it's not anything that has to happen in the CMS. So it could be, for example, you might have a CPC campaign, and you know that you need to type slowly so you hit the right ones. You know that you have to wait for Sam to publish or pay for, let's say. So you don't want this campaign going live or your release set live until something outside the CMS has happened. So it's just this idea of being able to have pending tasks, and until those are all done, probably should save that. Until everything in that set is marked as ready to release, we can't release that set. So you've got some additional sort of safeguards around what happens, when it happens, how it happens. Obviously, that all would need to be integrated with workflow so that these alternate versions have to go through workflow approval before they can be added to a set, things like that. But I mean, that's sort of the big picture idea as far as what I think would be the main feature to add to workflow for the next sort of major release. Can I make that green? No. So that's the release sets in a nutshell. Then the idea being that to extend with this sort of calendar view so that you could have an overview, a visual overview of when a release set's published, what items are in it, when they're scheduled, when they go live, and those sorts of things. So that's, again, that's what happens when I start playing with interfaces and just start building things. You end up with calendars that you then need to find it useful. That is release sets. Can we go back to that one? We can stop hammer time dancing. And I think that is me. And it's good I didn't have videos because I'm nearly out of time anyway. Perfect, planned it. So thank you all very much for joining me.